mathematically speaking, the universe should be beaming with intelligent life, but we see nothing and we hear nothing.
What if everything you experience is not happening to you, but through you? This question forms the core of Neville Goddard's philosophy. His teachings challenge the deeply held belief that we are mere participants in a fixed world. Instead, Goddard insisted that the world is a projection of consciousness, and each of us, knowingly or unknowingly, is the projector. The world is yourself pushed out. In modern terms, people often describe this worldview as a simulation. Though Goddard never used that word, the concept aligns in interesting ways. What he taught, decades before terms like quantum reality or simulation theory became popular, is that life itself is a dream, and each person is the dreamer in the act of awakening. But unlike a passive dreamer who is lost in sleep, this awakening is lucid, conscious, creative. One of Neville's most repeated ideas was this: the world is yourself, pushed out. This means that the people, circumstances, and conditions in your life mirror your inner beliefs, assumptions, and states of consciousness. It's not that you're imagining the world in a daydream sort of way, but that your deeper subconscious convictions are generating your experience of reality. According to this view, you're not in the simulation, you are its author. But here's where things begin to shift. When you believe the outer world has power over you, you stay asleep. You react. You resist. You obey the seeming rules of a dream you don't realize you're dreaming. But when you realize the source of all creation is within you, your awareness, your imagination, your assumptions, you begin to wake up. This is the first step in exiting the simulation, not by leaving it physically, but by transcending its illusion of control. Imagination, the key to creation. Goddard's entire philosophy hinges on imagination, but not imagination as wishful thinking or escapism. He meant imagination as a divine faculty, the creative force itself. In his lectures and writings, he often quoted the Bible, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind," in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. To Goddard, this was no metaphor. When you change your inner assumptions, when you imagine a new reality clearly, emotionally, and persistently, you shape the outer world accordingly. This is not magic, it's law. He called this the law of assumption. From this perspective, exiting the simulation doesn't mean unplugging from life. It means stopping the habit of thinking you're trapped, limited, or powerless. You awaken to your role as the dreamer who can shift the dream, not by force, but by consciousness. This bold line, which Goddard often used, isn't about ego. It's about awakening to your true nature. To Goddard, each person is a fragment of God, asleep within the human form. Life is a journey of remembering. The simulation, so to speak, is a kind of play, one in which the divine dreams itself into limitation, only to remember its true identity through experience, struggle, and finally, conscious creation. This mirrors many ancient ideas, including the Vedic notion of Lila, the divine play, and Plato's allegory of the cave, in which prisoners mistake shadows for reality until one escapes and sees the light. The first shift. Inner stillness. Before anything can change in the so-called simulation, Neville emphasized the importance of stillness, inner silence, the ability to quiet the racing thoughts, detach from external appearances, and return to the I am, the awareness behind all thought. This is not passive or empty. It's the quiet place from which all creation begins. He would often say, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled." This isn't about pretending. It's about entering the state of already being, already having, already becoming, And once you enter that inner state deeply enough without contradiction, without doubt, the outer world must conform, not instantly, always, but inevitably. But you may ask, what if your circumstances aren't the product of your actions, but of your state of being? The hidden mechanism, states of consciousness as the true reality. This idea goes far deeper than wishful thinking or motivational slogans. It reveals a structure beneath experience, one that suggests the world isn't reacting to your effort, but to your essence. And Neville Goddard placed this at the center of his teachings. To shift the world, you must shift states. A state of consciousness is more than a mood or feeling. It's an entire identity, a pattern of belief, perception, and expectation that shapes how life appears around you. Each state is like a lens, and depending on the lens you live through, the world presents itself accordingly. Neville never said you needed to chase success, heal wounds, or earn blessings. He said you only needed to inhabit the state where those things are natural outcomes. That's the key. Imagine standing in front of a rack filled with invisible coats. Each coat represents a different version of yourself, a version that's wealthy, joyful, sick, lonely, strong, free, or anything else. You don't need to earn any of these states. You only need to wear one fully. That's the metaphor Neville leaned into again and again. To enter a state means to embody it mentally, emotionally, and spiritually before the outer world gives you any confirmation. And this is where most people fall short. They wait to see the world change before they give themselves permission to feel secure, joyful, loved, or capable. But Neville made it clear, the outer is delayed. It reflects the inner, but always with a pause. If you plant a seed of peace today, don't expect the tree to appear tomorrow. Stay in the peace, and the outer will take form. But why do most people stay trapped? The reason most people feel stuck in a simulation or fixed life isn't because of their conditions. It's because they unknowingly return to the same states every day. They may try to change habits, start new routines, or set different goals. But underneath, they stay loyal to the same inner narrative. I'm limited. I'm unlucky. I always struggle. People don't see me. Neville taught that until this inner identity changes, no real shift can occur. Life may rearrange itself a little. New job, new city, new relationship, but the deeper story keeps pulling the person back into the same loops. This is why many spiritual seekers repeat the same experiences even after learning the teachings. They may know the words, but they haven't dwelt in a new state long enough for reality to shift in a lasting way. But how do you enter this state? How to enter a new state? You don't need rituals, complex affirmations, or special environments. According to Neville, the process is simple but requires sincerity. He taught that the moment between wakefulness and sleep, the drowsy twilight known as the hypnagogic state, is your most fertile soil. In this in-between space, your conscious mind is relaxed and the subconscious is wide open. This is where the new state can be planted. Instead of reviewing your day or worrying about tomorrow, Neville instructed you to gently guide your inner world into the desired experience. Not by forcing images, but by feeling the scene. How would you feel if the change was already true? That feeling is the bridge, and once you feel it, really feel it, you remain there quietly until sleep carries it deep within. From that point on, your subconscious will begin reshaping the simulation to reflect the state you've assumed. Neville didn't promise instant results, but he did emphasize inner loyalty. That means refusing to jump back to old states the moment reality wobbles. You stay loyal to your new identity even when nothing seems to be happening. That's faith, not blind belief, but spiritual consistency. He would say, do not discuss your dreams with those who are not in sympathy with your dream. Why? Because if you share your inner seed with people who doubt it, you risk digging it up before it can grow. To exit the simulation, in Neville's terms, is to stop living from reactions and start living from conscious assumption. To become so anchored in your new state that the world must yield to it. This is not denial of reality. It's mastery of attention. You no longer look to the world to tell you who you are. You tell the world. The real journey begins when you decide to test this for yourself, not as theory, but in quiet, deliberate practice. Choose a state, not one filled with craving or anxiety, but one that feels peaceful, real, and rooted in your heart. Then dwell in it. Morning, evening, especially as you drift into sleep. Don't rush the evidence. Don't wrestle with appearances. Just persist in the feeling. This is the method Neville returned to throughout his life, not because it sounded good, but because it worked. Reality is elastic to the state you live from, and when that clicks into place, not just mentally, but experientially, you begin to walk through the simulation as its author, not its subject. What if everything you call real first passed through the quiet corridors of imagination? Most people think of imagination as a tool for artists or children. It's often dismissed as play, creativity, or daydreaming. But in Neville's understanding, imagination is not just where fantasies live, it's where reality begins. He called it the creative power of the universe, the invisible current behind everything you see and touch. And unlike what you were taught in school, imagination isn't something you outgrow. In fact, it's the one faculty you must reclaim if you want to exit the simulation of reactive living. The inner world shapes the outer world. Neville explained that imagination doesn't just reflect reality, it creates it. Every structure, belief, relationship, and event is the echo of a once-felt inner picture. The phone you're using was once a thought. The clothes you wear, the room you sit in, all of it first existed as unseen patterns within someone's mind. This means you're never at the mercy of the external world. What appears to happen to you is actually happening through you, based on the images and moods you habitually accept inside yourself. To most people, this sounds backwards. They believe they imagine because of what they experience. Neville flips it. You experience because of what you imagine. One of the most misunderstood ideas in spiritual teachings is that you must visualize your goals to manifest them. But Neville's instruction was far more specific. He said the mistake is to look at the scene you want from the outside like watching a movie. That creates distance. It affirms you're not there yet. Instead, you must enter the scene. Feel it from the inside. Be the version of yourself who already lives in that new state. Let your imagination wrap around you like a coat. Don't wish for it. Live from it. This is not make-believe. It's deeper than words or mental images. It's the quiet assumption that this is who I am now. It's an invisible shift, one that no one may notice but you. But the outer world begins to adjust, often in strange and subtle ways, to match that new self-image. The power of an imaginal act. An imaginal act is not about force. It's about depth and sincerity. When you close your eyes and enter the mood of your desired experience, even for a few seconds, you're placing a request, not to the universe as a distant force, but to your own creative power. Neville taught that every imaginal act, faithfully performed, is like a seed dropped into the soil of consciousness. Some grow quickly, others take longer, but none are forgotten. This is why he stressed doing these acts in silence, in secret, without needing validation from others. Once you've imagined something clearly and felt its reality, even for a moment, it begins to take form. And the more you return to that inner experience, the more solid it becomes. This simulation we live in, the one that appears stable and real, is more like a projection. It responds to the beliefs you hold most deeply, especially the ones you've never questioned. Your imagination is the doorway through which you enter new versions of this projection. Neville would say, your imagination is God. He didn't mean this in a dogmatic sense. He meant that the creative principle, the same force that brings galaxies into being, is operating inside you every time you imagine and believe. So when you step into a new imaginal scene with full faith, you're not hoping for change. You're engaging the fundamental mechanics of creation. The difference between fantasy and real inner movement. It's important to recognize the line between shallow daydreaming and true inner movement. Fantasy is empty. It's often driven by lack and anxiety. It's imagining something while still feeling it's out of reach. It doesn't change your inner stance. Real inner movement, on the other hand, carries weight. It lingers. It shifts your posture. Even when you open your eyes, the echo of the scene remains. It becomes harder to return to your old assumptions because your inner alignment has shifted, and that shift is the real work. Neville never asked you to chase signs or confirmations. He asked you to stay loyal to the new mood, even when the world doesn't yet show it. The simulation isn't fixed. It only appears solid because you keep feeding the same data into it through habit, attention, and belief. When you stop reacting to appearances and start building from within, the outer world becomes flexible. It bends, gently at first, through coincidences, unexpected encounters, changes in mood. Then it reshapes entirely. Imagination is the lever. The longer you stay in a new inner state, the more your surroundings begin to take on its texture. You don't force anything, you become, and the world follows. Most people will never use this power. They'll live by reaction, adjusting themselves to the simulation rather than realizing they can rewrite it. But if you make imagination your primary reality, if you give more attention to the scenes you dwell in internally than the ones you see outside, you step into your true role as the author of your experience. And the simulation starts to respond in ways that can only be described as miraculous. What if time isn't a river flowing forward, but a vast field in which all moments already exist? Time doesn't move, you do. This idea might sound impossible until you stop trying to make it fit the way you've always thought about time. In Neville Goddard's work, time was never linear. It wasn't even real in the way most people think. To him, time was structure, something already complete. You don't move through time, you move within it. That means your past, present, and future are all happening right now. They are states, like rooms in a house. And just like you can walk into a different room, you can shift into a different timeline by changing your awareness. This isn't theory, it's a practical tool to escape the prison of your current identity. Most people are stuck because they believe in time as something they can't control. They say things like, maybe later, or it'll happen someday, not realizing that they're reinforcing delay. Neville's view was the opposite. He taught that you decide the moment by choosing the state. You are not a passenger in time. You are the one flipping between stations. When you feel stuck in life, it's not because time is slow. It's because you haven't changed your internal channel. In this framework, memories aren't just echoes, they're doors. And so are your desires. Each moment is a snapshot of a possible world. You are the projector. The film doesn't run itself. Neville's most famous teaching, the law of assumption, doesn't just shape reality, it also bends time. When you assume something is true now, you skip the wait. You collapse the illusion of linear progression. It's not about pretending, it's about embodying. He often said, to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to awaken that state. That's not just emotional advice. That's spiritual geometry. In a non-linear universe, the moment you assume a new version of yourself, you have shifted into the timeline where that reality is already true. There is no lag unless you assume one. People don't realize how fluid the present moment really is. They think it's the result of what came before. But Neville flipped that. He said the present is a mirror, not of the past, but of your dominant state. What you see now is simply the reflection of what you've been assuming most often. This is why people repeat the same cycles. They keep expecting the future to change while remaining loyal to old moods, beliefs, and identities. But nothing new can grow in the soil of the same old state. If you want something different, you don't wait. You move, internally, quietly, with intention. Memory is a trap unless you use it right. One of Neville's most radical ideas was this: even memory is not fixed. What you remember is colored by your current identity. In other words, the past you think you know only exists as long as you continue to identify with the self who lived it. Change your identity and you change your memory, not by rewriting facts, but by seeing them through a new lens. This is crucial for escaping the simulation. Most people stay trapped because they keep playing the same emotional story over and over again. But when you stop feeding old memories with your present energy, they lose power. They become distant echoes instead of active instructions. In Neville's view, every version of you already exists. There is no becoming, only selecting. If you can imagine a future version of yourself with more peace, clarity, health, or abundance, then that version is already alive on another track, and the path to that version isn't effort, it's alignment. You align by feeling now what that version of you already knows, not by waiting for proof, not by hoping something changes first. You start small, in your body, in your reactions, in your beliefs. These are the levers. The simulation is built to reflect the version of yourself you most trust. When you shift trust to the future version, you bring it into view. You've been taught that time pulls you forward, dragging events toward you. But in Neville's vision, time is more like an echo of your inner states. The world doesn't come at you. It comes from you. It's a mirror, not a machine. So when you begin acting, speaking, and feeling as though your new life is already here, time adjusts accordingly. Events and people arrange themselves, not because you pushed anything, but because you aligned with a new signal. This is how you exit the simulation, by refusing to be ruled by the false idea of time as a master. What does it look like to live outside the timeline others are trapped in? It means moving quietly while everyone else waits. It means assuming power where others plead for it. It means walking as though the stage has already shifted, because it has, even if no one else sees it yet. Neville never needed you to explain or justify. He wanted you to feel, to accept, to walk differently. The simulation recognizes those who do not follow the delay pattern. It calls them lucky. But luck is just the name given to those who refuse the script. Everything you meet is you in disguise. Reality begins to take on a strange glow when you realize it isn't made of objects, but of reflections. The people who frustrate you, the moments that repeat, the dreams that pull at you from behind your eyes, they are all versions of you, filtered through form, not metaphorically, actually. This isn't an idea to debate. It's something to sit with, to feel. The more you lean into this lens, the more clear it becomes. Reality doesn't bring you what you want. It brings you what you are. Every interaction is a mirror. Every situation is an echo. When something in your external world shifts, it's because something in your internal world moved first. You didn't need to talk about it. You didn't need to write it down. It happened in a quiet decision, a breath, a choice, a withdrawal of energy from an old pattern. And without warning, the stage rearranged itself. This is the architecture of the simulation. It doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your state. This world operates on feedback. It doesn't generate. It reflects. The people who show up in your life are showing you yourself. Your fears, your expectations, your unspoken rules, your beliefs about love, money, health, and meaning. When you shift inside and the world around you changes, it's not coincidence. It's confirmation. You can begin to test this gently. When someone disrespects you, ask yourself, not in shame, but in honesty, where have you been disrespecting yourself? When things feel stuck, notice, have you been holding onto a story that no longer fits, trying to prove that you are right, instead of realizing that you are free? Freedom begins where blame ends. Once you start seeing the world this way, it's impossible to unsee it. A stranger's mood begins to feel like your own reflection. Patterns in relationships stop feeling random and begin to reveal the shape of your internal script. Even the delays and detours in your life start to look like your own hands reshaping the road beneath your feet. The separation you thought was real begins to crumble. You understand that each conflict is just you arguing with a part of yourself you haven't accepted yet. Each painful loop is just the system giving you another chance to choose differently. It isn't easy at first. Most people will fight hard to keep their reflection from speaking. They will project instead of reflect. But the moment you own it, it softens. It loses power over you. Patterns break when you stop reacting. Nothing keeps you in the simulation more than reaction. Reacting feeds the loop. Every time you meet frustration with anger, silence with fear, or criticism with self-doubt, you're confirming the version of yourself that was built by the simulation. The only way out is to pause, observe, and respond from a new place. Responding doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means recognizing it without feeding it. The moment you break the rhythm of your normal reaction, you break the pattern. Something opens. The mirror cracks. A new timeline slips through. This is why stillness is not weakness. It's the foundation of quantum power. The system expects you to be predictable. The simulation wants you to defend your pain. But when you don't take the bait, it has nothing left to reflect, and it has to offer something else. Your imagination is not pretend. It is the control panel. When you think of something vividly and feel it as real, you are programming a new line of code into the simulation. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be felt. The version of you who already has the peace, the love, the certainty, you can meet them now in imagination. You can walk with them. You can observe how they speak, how they breathe, how they make decisions. And every time you do that, you're not just visualizing, you're merging. Eventually, the boundary between that version and this version begins to disappear. What you once imagined becomes ordinary. That's when it shows up outside you. It's easy to blame other people for where you are. It's easy to say they didn't understand you, they didn't support you, they betrayed you, blocked you, left you behind. But those people weren't just people. They were mirrors. They came to reflect your boundaries, your self-image, your fear of being misunderstood, your craving to be chosen. When you change, they either mirror the new you or they leave. Let them. That's how the system works. Nothing external can hold you where you no longer belong. The simulation isn't punishing you. It's revealing you. By the time your world looks different, it's already old news. The real shift happened earlier, When you finally stopped giving your energy to the version of you that was tired, small, afraid, or forgotten. When you chose, quietly and privately, to see yourself as someone who belongs in a different story. That moment rewrote the code. Everything else is just the echo. The script was never final. What if the story you've been living wasn't fixed? What if every so-called event in your life was more like a scene you improvised your way into, not because it was destined, but because you expected it, believed it, rehearsed it internally? This world operates more like a stage play than a fixed timeline. The players change costumes, but the script is optional. Most people don't realize they're allowed to rewrite it. They think the role they were given, the childhood, the relationships, the losses, the labels, is who they are. But it never was. It was a starting point. The moment you stop reciting the old lines, the play halts. The system glitches. Something in the invisible responds. Because now the actor is awake. If you're waiting for lightning bolts, you'll miss it. True transformation doesn't usually feel like fireworks. It feels like peace. You notice that things which used to bother you don't. You forget to worry about what people think. You stop defending old versions of yourself. It happens quietly, in the space between thoughts. Suddenly you wake up and realize that fear you lived with for years, it's just gone. That person who used to trigger you, they don't anymore. The environment that used to feel heavy is now neutral or even light. These are signs of a shift. The scenery will catch up. Time loops break. When identity changes, most people believe they're stuck because of their circumstances. But look deeper and you'll see they're repeating patterns because they haven't changed who they think they are. Circumstances orbit identity. Change the center and the orbit must shift. When you think of yourself as someone who is always anxious, always left out, always trying to prove your worth, then reality has no choice but to reflect situations that match that blueprint. But when you start feeling into a version of yourself that is at peace, loved, already worthy, you force the feedback loop to change. It doesn't matter if others notice right away. What matters is the field has been updated, and the field always responds. Before you walk into a room, your frequency has already arrived. Others don't respond to your words. They respond to the vibration you're carrying, even if they don't consciously realize it. The simulation does this too. It scans for coherence. It mirrors what you broadcast. This is why trying harder doesn't always work. You can say affirmations all day, but if you don't believe them, if they don't match your energy, the field won't shift. But speak once from a place of full alignment, even silently, and the system rearranges to accommodate. It's not about being louder, it's about being truer. Many have been taught that wanting more is wrong, that to desire peace, abundance, freedom, love is selfish or unrealistic. But what if desire is the language of your higher self? What if your deepest wants aren't random, but sacred? The things you long for are not accidents, they're invitations. Your desires are how the field pulls you toward the next version of your life. But most people doubt their own longings. They call them daydreams or foolishness. So they ignore the map, and then wonder why the road feels cold and confusing. The next version of your life is already built. It waits at the frequency of your truest desire. Control is a distraction from alignment. Trying to control everything, people, outcomes, opinions, is a trick of the simulation. It keeps you reacting, reaching, trying to fix what was never broken. Control creates tension, and tension distorts the field. When you're forcing outcomes, you're broadcasting fear. The alternative isn't passivity, it's precision. It's knowing that your role is not to push reality into form, but to tune yourself like an instrument to the version of life you want to live. Once you're tuned in, the right scenes arrive automatically. The right people, the right doors, the right timing. You don't chase the aligned version of your life. You match it. Every moment is a gateway, even now. The mind will always want to rush to the next step, to figure everything out before it happens. But the code doesn't reveal itself that way. It flows through presence, through surrender to the now, not the future. What you are feeling now is the seed of what's next. Don't override it. Let it speak. Let it shape the next version of your timeline through truth, not force. You don't need to be ready. You need to be real. The exit was hidden in plain sight. There's no door to unlock, no hidden portal, no final boss you need to defeat. The simulation doesn't trap you through force, it traps you through agreement. And the moment you withdraw your agreement, everything begins to bend. The most powerful exits don't come with explosions or endings. They come with stillness, with clarity, with the simple and silent realization, I no longer believe this version of myself. That's when the walls start to thin. That's when the loop begins to dissolve. You've always had the code, but the code isn't a word. It's not a spell. It's a frequency, and that frequency is authenticity. People talk about waking up or leaving the simulation like it's about transcending this world. But the real shift isn't about escaping life. It's about seeing it clearly for the first time. It's about emerging from the roles you never questioned, the obligations you never examined, the beliefs you never chose. The exit is subtle. You don't leave the world, you leave the lie. And that changes everything. You might still live in the same place, walk the same streets, talk to the same people, but none of it will feel the same, because now you're moving through it with eyes that remember who you are. As long as you're trying to prove your worth, your alignment, your value, or your spiritual growth, you're still caught in the web. The simulation feeds on performance. It rewards mimicry and punishes authenticity, until you realize that the punishment is a test, not a truth. The more real you become, the more reality starts to look unreal. The world begins to glitch, gently at first. Coincidences multiply. Old stories stop sticking. The right people appear without effort. Things you fought for begin to flow, not because you gave up, but because you stepped out of the script that made it all feel hard. When you stop performing, you stop broadcasting confusion. You become a signal, and the system can't ignore a pure signal. The timeline isn't linear, it's layered. Most of us live like we're following a track, A to B, cause to effect. But reality isn't built like that. It's stacked, like sheets of music playing simultaneously. And the version you experience is the one you're attuned to, not the one that's true, but the one that resonates. The you who is thriving already exists. The you who is free. The you who remembers. You don't have to create that life from scratch. You just have to join it, not through action, but through frequency. Frequency is changed by choice, not force. You shift not when you get something, but when you let go of what you're not. You'll know you're exiting the simulation when it resists you. Old patterns try to lure you back. Familiar roles beg for rehearsal. The system starts glitching in small ways. Uncomfortable pauses, tension in old relationships, the sudden collapse of things you once clung to. This isn't failure, it's proof. The system can't hold you if you stop feeding it. But don't expect applause when you walk away. Expect silence, expect resistance. Then, eventually, expect freedom. You were never meant to live inside someone else's blueprint. The architecture of this reality was not designed to keep you small. It was designed to test whether you would stay small by choice. And you did. We all do, until we don't. There comes a moment, not grand, but honest, when you realize you can't keep pretending. You can't keep shrinking. You can't keep reciting lines that were never yours. That's the moment the exit appears. Not once, not dramatically, but moment by moment, decision by decision. Every time you choose truth over performance, presence over pattern, intuition over fear, you rewrite the code. The simulation can only reflect. And the more you become who you really are, beneath the roles, the wounds, the stories, the more the world will reflect a life you never thought possible. This is not about perfection. It's about permission. You have permission now to stop waiting, to stop looping, to stop apologizing for being the version of you that can't be contained by this script. You didn't come here to fit in. You came here to remember that you were never trapped. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.